Welcome to the 44th episode of the World Builder's Anvil. I'm your host, Jeffrey W. Ingram, and today's topic, Fantasy Character Fashion Show. Don't know where to start building your fantasy world? Do you need more? Does it make sense? Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination. This is the place that will help prime your mind. Now, it's time to heat up the forge, break out the mithril ingots and hammer. Welcome to the World Builder's Anvil. I'm your host, Jeffrey W. Ingram. Let's sup from the mug of Java and build. Let's get right into the topic of the day, and that is essentially the fantasy character's fashion. And I do really mean a little bit more than fashion, much like when I talked about what I like to consider the character's baseline, which is the cultural fashion. And that's the cultural group that the character identifies with their fashion. What does the character look like? Based off of the cultural fashion. And really when I like to think about these things, it's the further they derive off the normal, the more likely people are to talk up or think about these things or when I record them. And I'll get more into that as I go through some of the different topics I like to look at. There's two other things you have to keep track of when you're doing this. The first thing is the character's lifespan. What are the changes to the culture and the dress in that time? And there could be none, or maybe they're adopting new clothing somewhere in or around the time the character's been born until the time of the story. If that happens, the character might hold on to the older fashion or move on to the newer fashion, and that'd be based off of the character motivations and what makes that character drive with, are they new fashion or old fashion? Are they traditional or are they new? And the other thing I like to look at is age and travel modifiers. So when characters get older, sometimes either due to laziness, they start to let go of things that were important to them when they were younger, or just the opposite, they become more ingrained into them. And they become, not, I wouldn't say OCD over stuff, but they're more likely to be ritualistic with the way they approach things. And you have to keep those two things specifically in mind with age. And then travel modifiers, how well traveled is the character? Has he seen a lot of different places, a lot of different cultures, been exposed to a lot of different things? If he has been, he's probably brought some of that back with him. So when he does that, that will expand the possibility of things that the character can dress in or have upon themselves when they're walking around. Now let's talk about appearance. Let's say you have a female character. One of the things you need to know are their physical attributes. Hair. What does the hair look like? What is the color of the hair? What is the length of the hair? If it doesn't really stick out, I don't track this. But if it's something that really sticks out in the culture, or it's something that I want to deal with in a story, it will get written down. Eyes. Same thing. What is the eye color? And once again, this will come from your list of known eye colors, probably. But once again, if it doesn't come up in the story, it's not that important to know. Mouth. What's the shape of the mouth? Is it off-center? Anything physically distinctive about the character I want to know about when I talk about their appearance. Are they larger than average, smaller than average? If they're average across the board, there'll probably be very little in the appearance section of a character when I deal with them in world building. Clothing. This is something else I like to look at. And this will usually, at least when the character starts off their travels or their life, will be very culturally appropriate clothing. Do they wear pants or any form of things to cover their legs? If so, what are those things? And I'm more likely to talk about that here, even if they're culturally normal, just to help me keep in mind what they're wearing. And so I know if they're wearing your sort of 1950s pinup girl, tribal, the best way to call it would be a leather-based bikini. If they're wearing that and it's really cold, how's the character going to react? And it helps keep in my mind what they're normally wearing, and if weather becomes an issue or something else where I think the clothing's not appropriate, that's something the character's going to have to deal with in the story. Now, under the pants. Might or might not be important here. Once again, if it's something exceptional and it comes up in the story, I'll probably track what their underclothing is. or lack of underclothing. Accessories, brooches, jewelry, anything that the character might have on them, kind of come from a status standpoint. They have a signet ring because they're a king. They have a scepter and a crown. Those are usually signs of, being, once again, a king or queen. So what kind of accessories do the characters typically have on them? Or if they have special things that they bring out for certain times, what are those things? And when you get into especially accessories and clothing, their travel modifier is very important. And the reason it's really important here is maybe they pick stuff along the ways of their travel. So they have this stuff with them. Maybe they use it because, it shows that they are well traveled, or they have the money to bring the stuff back with them. Whatever the reason they have it isn't important. The fact is that they do have it. And I don't want to know why they would deviate from their cultural norms if they do. Maybe it's looking at the characters' characteristics versus the cultural characteristics. Maybe they're anti their culture naturally. It appeals to them to dress away. Or maybe they are for clothing. Maybe they're very fashion forward and that's important to them as a character. These are the kind of reasons that they might deviate. Maybe once again to show off wealth or status because I can afford the cloak from the people across the world. You people can't afford to leave your farm. And when people get like that, they're going to have things to show it off. And they're going to have things that might be innocuous, but are really going to stick out to the locals. The little things in the home. So when you look at a house, this is where the traveling becomes a bigger issue. You're going to more than likely have at least mementos of your travel. And those will be things that can be laying around that people from the area might not recognize if they see them. For example, if you had stolen silkworms from China and brought them back to your home and you had them in a jar, people probably would not know what they are. Especially if they're making silk. They're like, what's going on here? Or, you stole a compass from the east and you brought it back to the west. Once again, people would be like, what is this? Or gunpowder. There are many things that don't simultaneously show up around the world. On a smaller note, written word. Maybe the culture you're dealing with has not developed their own writing system, but a person brings back books. And everyone's like, what are these strange things? Or maybe they're used to writing them in clay or stone and you bring back paper. So there are lots of little details that you can add in right here to your character, whether it's your main character or someone they're going to interact with. And once again, type of materials, things that aren't local will get listed here. So if the person has all silk clothing and there's no silk around, that's a big deal, something I want to make sure I remember. But if they're wearing typical common clothes for the people they're interacting with, I'll probably just list sort of common materials. And I might not even list them by name because it won't be important because it will never come up in the story. Weapon of choice. There might be multiple weapons a character uses, and they might not all be weapons as we think of weapons. So when we think of weapons, we think of swords or spears or guns or cannons. Those are very obvious weapons, and maybe a character does or does not have those kind of weapons. But they're going to have weapons for different kinds of reasons. To think of alternate weapons, maybe it is books. Maybe it's books that will teach you magic, and the person's trying to learn magic, and they have a skill for it. So really, that book that teaches them magic is a weapon, even though if people saw them carrying a book, they might not think of it as a weapon. Because to most people, it's not a weapon. Maybe it's a signet of authority. You're handed a scepter to say that you are in charge of an invasion for another country. Rome would do this. They would give these scepters when they've approved an invasion of a different country. And that person would take that, and that would say that that was really a weapon in their hands because it was saying they had the authority of their state to do what they were doing. And if you interfere with them and they have this rod with them, well, you're in huge trouble because, well, they've been authorized by the state to perform whatever activity they're doing. That is a very powerful weapon. Maybe it's a magic item that doesn't look like a weapon, but really is in the more classic sense of it will kill you. So I have this rock that's designed to kill a certain person if they hold it. And I can carry it around and I offer them the rock, they take it and they die. So there are lots of little things that can be weapons. Some of them are obviously weapons and some are not. The bigger thing is to consider why they have those items, and they might not always have each of them on them. But let's say I have someone who's very skilled with a sword. They're probably going to have a sword at their disposal. They might not carry it around all the time, but they're going to have one at their disposal because they have the skill to use the sword. Or maybe it's a spear or a staff or a bow. Whatever the item is, doesn't matter. The point is, it's because of their skill, they have the possession of this weapon. And if they don't use it all the time, it's a way to make a statement in the book that, wow, Miranda, that powerful warrior, has picked up her sword again. And when she picks up her sword, she means to use it. And people who see Miranda carrying that sword go, oh no, something's going on. And then they'll make their judgments based off of their opinions of Miranda. Intimidation. Maybe there's certain weapons that you're not so skilled with, but look really intimidating. Think of a Minotaur carrying what would be a 5-hand axe for humans. And maybe he can wield it, but it's not a very efficient weapon for him to use. But if he's walking into a negotiation carrying an axe the size of a human, you're going to sit there and go, okay, wow, he can carry that thing? Oh my gosh, he's really strong. It can add a level of intimidation to the people around who see it. And that's the reason they use it. And maybe if it came to combat, this Minotaur is dropping that giant, what we would call a pole arm, that he's using as an axe, and pulling out a dagger because he's really good with the dagger, and start slicing you to pieces with the dagger because he's really good with a knife, and which would really be kind of a funny weapon for a Minotaur if you keep that in mind. But he daggers you to death. That would be his skill weapon. The axe would be his intimidation weapon. And the other one would be the show of wealth. That's your ceremonial weapons. It's the really pretty armor or sword that you have. And I do consider armor a weapon too. A knight walking around in full plate armor in like the 13th or 14th century, that's an intimidation weapon. And it's has a defensive purpose to it when he's in combat. But your average person isn't going to go up and start picking on a guy who's in 60 pounds of plate metal. But they might have a ceremonial version of that armor that's really pretty, that, has the face of a god emblazoned on a shield that goes across the face. Or it's just very ornament. It has gold and jewels, something you never wear on the battlefield. But you would wear to show either your status or wealth in the society. There's a simple formula. Yes, I have a formula for this. That's how geeky I am. But there's a simple formula I like to look at when I think of character fashion. It is character taste plus ability to acquire equals character fashion. And that's really what it's going to boil down to ultimately. The better you know your characters, the easier it becomes. Maybe the character has the chance to acquire anything he wants to, but he likes to dress like a commoner because he's what we would call very humble, or he wants to appear very humble. So it really comes down to the character taste, and I kind of built into that the motivations of the character and the ability to acquire. Can they get it? Everyone in medieval Europe probably wanted silk. However, very few people could actually afford it. So really, when you look at those two things, that's how you get the character fashion. And I like to talk about appearance here too, because it is important to know how your characters look. The rating for this episode. This is a basic topic. You need to know the way your characters look. And you don't need to know every detail I've listed here. And there might be other things that you think of that you want to add in. But it's really the things that are going to stick out in the minds of the people who interact with them. That is the character appearance. That is the character fashion show. The world building task for the day. Take an important character in your world and look at their fashion. What is their fashion? And why? And why do they dress that way? What are the motivations that get them to dress that way or use those things that they carry around with them? So just get one character. Think it through if you haven't. If you already have, this will be very quick because you're done. If not, well, you have a little more to do. the real world task for the day. Share your celebrations with your loved ones. So when you get that raise at work, when you finish your college degree, whenever you hit some milestone in your life that you want to say, yes, this is my victory because I've worked hard to get here, don't forget about the people who supported you in your life. And when I say loved ones, that's really what I mean. It could be platonic love. It could be sexual attraction love. It doesn't matter. The people who support you along your path, who help get you to where you are, be very thankful to them in these times when you're celebrating, because even if it's only little bits of encouragement or perhaps full-fledged help that they give you, you owe them all a little bit of things. So share your celebrations with them. The tease for this episode. That's easy, because I need that magic wand. Check in next time for why I need that magic wand. And as always, make sure to go to gardul.com. That's GARDUL.com for the show notes. It'll be under podcasting, World Builders Anvil. That's a great place to get all of the information from the episode that you've just listened to, and to see all the resources that we've talked about in this episode. Thanks for joining us this episode of the World Builders Anvil. Please be sure to rate and review us in iTunes, and please help get the word out to your friends about our show. And join me, Jeffrey W. Ingram at gardul.com, to see the progress of my world and learn why I made the choices I did. And please contact me and let me know the topics you would love to hear in the future. Now strike while the myth rolls high.